So that was a heartbreaking loss for the Sixers last night, as some spirit willed in Kawhi's shot at the buzzer there. So now there's a lot of things to talk about with Philly. And the number one thing I want to talk about is how do they make this team respectable when Joel Embiid's not in the game? Because we saw throughout the Raptors series, and there's stats for this all over Twitter and everything, basically when Embiid was in the game, they were the better team. When Embiid was not in the game, the Raptors were significantly the better team, to the point where, of course, the Raptors won the series. So I think you need to be as good as you possibly can be at staggering Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. So I think the backup center needs to be somebody who can space the floor out for Ben, and you hope can be still respectable defensively and all that. The thing with that, though, is it's kind of tough to get that guy, because that guy is either really valuable to another team or they are going to cost quite a bit in free agency. Now, this team has some money to play with, assuming they sign Tobias Harris, and maybe it's a max contract, maybe it isn't. Jimmy Butler, you got to assume, is a max. Then they would still have their mid-level for this offseason, and I mean, do I think Brook Lopez is not going to be on the Bucks next season? No, I think they're going to re-sign him. I think Gasol's going to accept his player option. Horford's up in the air, but he could certainly get more than a mid-level. Same things for Boogie and Vucevic. So then after that, we're looking at my guy, Dwayne Dedmon, who made threes this year, just saying. And then after that, I've got no clue. Of course, there is Jonah Bolden, who's a 6'10 dude who can make some threes. Maybe he's the option, maybe he isn't. But I think that would be the best thing for them, right? Because you assume Ben Simmons and spacing, it just makes sense. But now we have to get to the idea of, should they sign Tobias and Jimmy Butler? So at some point during this thing, I said that Tobias might be better than Jimmy. I think the playoffs proved that that is not the case. Jimmy Butler had a lot of moments in the postseason for this team, whether it was ISO situations or being the savior of a game or whatever it may be. He was just better. I mean, Tobias Harris was kind of just another guy out there. You could argue that the switch of having him defend Marc Gasol did freak out the Raptors a bit, but I don't think that means Tobias Harris is some amazing defensive player or anything. So maybe Philly would have to be content with the idea of, if the asking price for Tobias gets too high, then they should let him walk. And I know that that would be a pretty tough pill to swallow given the stuff that they traded for him, mainly Shamet. But even so, you don't want to be locked up in salary and you can't really do anything just because you're too stubborn to admit that you might have made a mistake. Now, maybe they didn't make a mistake. Maybe they can figure out other ways to get Tobias going in the postseason. But, I mean, again, he was not bad, but if you got to give that guy $27, $28 million, or potentially even the max, which for him would be about 32, then it's just not good. You don't want to do that. So anyway, that's my big basketball stuff for this team in terms of, like, moves they can make. There are definitely play style things that we'll talk about in a second here, but that's the main thing. I mean, just trying to be good without Embiid on the floor, and then evaluating, do we really re-sign Tobias? What are we going to do here? So now we move on to Ben Simmons. So Ben had his moments in the playoffs, certainly, and we saw the value of him being an off-ball player, setting screens, and there were definitely games where he was kind of great in the playoffs doing that. There was that one select game against the Nets that was really good. He had other games like it, but overall the dude averaged like 14 and 6 in the postseason. Not the best, right? Now earlier what I said, the idea of him being staggered with Embiid and getting another big who can shoot, I think that could certainly improve the stat line for Ben. But if he's not going to be a shooter, then I think he has to just become amazing at screening and also posting up. He did have some post-ups in the Game 7 against Toronto that looked really good. And I think he's just got to do more of that. I mean, is it a little awkward because of Embiid? Yes, but you got what you got here. Like, what has a better chance of happening? Ben Simmons being a shooter or him being able to score in the post? You got to take what you can. And then I guess the conversation after that one is, once again, can Brett Brown handle that? I mean, I don't think he was a disaster in the postseason. I don't think he was particularly amazing, but I think he made adjustments when they needed to be made. Now, that doesn't mean that Philly's offense was looking great, because there were definitely times in that Game 7 where they were like, what do we do right now? They didn't have a go-to play or anything, and you could argue that there were not enough post-ups for Embiid and things like that. So, if you want to fire Brett Brown and you think somebody else can be better, fine. I don't think it's going to be some huge mistake getting rid of Brett Brown, but I don't know if there's going to be some obvious better choice out there. I mean, yeah, if you could trade him in for like Coach Bud a year ago, cool, but obviously that's not happening. Yeah, they're in a tough spot. It's a very awkward position, and it's definitely possible that they could screw this up somehow, but between, trying to get some more shooting around Ben and allowing him to play without Embiid so he can really be Ben Simmons and the team can still be good in those situations, and then Ben getting a little better off the ball, and them hopefully not giving Tobias Harris a max contract just because they think they're supposed to or something. Keeping Redick around, which is of course a priority for them because they desperately need his shooting. It is possible to get through this, but it's definitely going to be tricky. So it'll be an entertaining offseason for Philly, no doubt.